Okay, I'll start at the beginning. My name is Doug Boyd. I direct the Louis B. Nunn Center for Oral History in the University of Kentucky Libraries. For the past few years, we've been using oral history to document Kentucky's bourbon industry. Bourbon whiskey is an essential part of Kentucky's historical identity around the world. Yet very few oral history interviews had ever been recorded. So we began conducting oral history interviews all around the state, up and down the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. We interviewed the people at the heart of this signature industry. So in addition to conducting oral history interviews, the Nunn Center is a state-of-the-art archive. While processing the archival collection, preparing it for public access, we discovered a major problem. Bourbon whiskey did not have a Library of Congress subject heading.
The Library of Congress subject headings are a controlled vocabulary used by catalogers to assign subject terms to library materials. It's a controlled vocabulary, so that means that you have a unique term for any given topic.
A unique term for any given topic, except bourbon whiskey in 2013. And to make things worse, we were facing a major congressional anniversary.
One of bourbon's most historical events was in May of 1964 when Congress passed a resolution declaring it to be an indigenous product of the United States, or as we like to call it, America's only native spirit.
On May the 4th, 1964, Congress declared that bourbon whiskey had achieved recognition and acceptance throughout the world as a distinctive product of the United States.
In the fall of 2013, I was giving a lecture in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress. This was weighing pretty heavily on my mind at the time. I had to say something.
In 2013, when Doug came to lecture at the Library of Congress, and he took the stage, the first thing he said when he addressed the audience was that there was a gap in the record.
One problem that, on a side note, is that in Kentucky, it's kind of an issue, the word bourbon, the whiskey, does not have a Library of Congress subject heading. I hear a rumor that there are literally people in this room who could make that happen.
Like, we're the Library of Congress, the U.S. Library of Congress, and we had missed it.
What the hell took so long? We've been around for 200 years. Bourbon built America. I mean, the Whiskey Rebellion was all about paying for the Revolutionary War.
We had a subject heading for champagne, and that's French. It's not American.
Just as Scotch whiskey is a distinctive product of Scotland, Canadian whiskey a distinctive product of Canada, and cognac a distinctive product of the Cognac region of France, all with official government recognition, bourbon deserved the distinction that comes with official recognition as well.
We really knew we had to act.
A few months go by, I just couldn't take it anymore. We kept processing these interviews and the descriptions, they just seemed empty, incomplete. So I called up my colleague Bert Lyons, who worked at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. Bert instructed me on the right way to proceed. And on March 31st, 2014, I submitted the request. I had never submitted a Library of Congress subject heading before. Going through the process, I realized there were a lot of similarities between Library of Congress subject headings and Kentucky bourbon.
So, I mean, I guess God made Kentucky to make bourbon, and that's why we make bourbon right here in Kentucky, and we make the world's best bourbon right here.
Library of Congress subject headings are made in Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and they're some of the best subject headings in the world.
You know, you have to have good grains, you have to have good water, you've got to make it right. You know, got a good combination of grains, you have to age it right.
A good subject heading should be descriptive, it should be unique, it should be the term that is used by the community it describes.
I want ours to taste the same day in, day out, and that's what we've always strived for here as Built On, is be consistent in flavor and taste.
If you know that the same word is always going to be used for the same topic, that means you can search consistently in your library or in other libraries, and that's what we strive for.
Almost like the air of the ancestors that have been here for centuries or years or whatnot are still here.
When I do cataloging with subject headings, I I'm not only looking at the rules and the guidelines, I'm looking at the records that have already been made by catalogers before me to see how they've been used.
I think bourbon can turn a conversation into a party.
Subject headings turn a catalog into a discovery system.
You know, it can turn a meal into a celebration because you're with your friends.
There is a social aspect to cataloging. There are Facebook groups where we talk about cataloging. I have a blog where I talk about nothing but cataloging. I don't have a lot of followers.
You need to go out and find your enemies and drink bourbon. Maybe if we did, there would be less wars around the world.
Do you think subject headings could play any role in world peace? Following an intense period of extensive research and vetting, and I can imagine probably some tasting, in early May 2014 it was made official. Thanks to the American Folklife Center, the Library of Congress, bourbon whiskey became a Library of Congress subject heading. We did it.
Many thanks to Doug and the UK's Nunn Center and the Library of Congress for making this designation, because just as we are defined by standards of identity to produce the world's greatest bourbon, history and libraries are defined by standards. And without those standards, bourbon and history would fall apart.
I think the best bourbon is made right here in Kentucky. 95% of the world's bourbon, I think, is made here in Kentucky. I don't really know where that other 5% comes from, but I wouldn't drink it.
As Archivist of the United States, I will sleep better knowing that bourbon whiskey is now a Library of Congress subject heading. Finally, this uniquely American spirit will take its rightful place as part of the greatest standardized vocabulary in the world. Please enjoy Kentucky bourbon history responsibly.